This morning, we understand that the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are going to go and visit the head of the Office for Budget Responsibility, this independent fiscal watchdog. Do you welcome that? Will this help the markets and calm the markets?
Well, it's a bit late for that now, isn't it? I mean, look, I cannot stress enough how angry people should be at this government for what is, without question, one of the biggest unforced errors in policymaking in this country's history. Their entire approach is to blame, not just the individual decisions that they've made, but their statement that they can cut taxes, increase spending, and that will be fine. When the markets reacted to that, doubling down on that over the weekend. Sacking the head of the Treasury, by the way, that hasn't helped, and ignoring the independent forecasts as part of the process. Look, people are saying, it's not some sort of magic force in the financial markets, it's individual people making decisions, looking at this government and saying, we have no faith in these institutions, and I'll be frank, I don't think either the Prime Minister or the Chancellor will ever get that back.
Well, Andrew Griffiths was saying that it was important that the mini-budget came out quickly. People needed to know what the plans were ahead of energy price rises, which come into effect tomorrow. He says they're working hand in hand with the Bank of England and the OBR now so that everyone has all the level of detail about their plans.
Well, that's complete nonsense. So first of all, the announcement on freezing energy bills came 3 weeks before the mini-budget. So the implementation of that, well, we could have had that at any time, but essentially the decision on that had been made. That is not what is at fault. It is the decisions that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister made, and they're both in this completely hand in glove together, that people have absolutely no faith in. They don't believe they will grow the economy, they don't believe they are sustainable, and the consequences of this, if you've got a mortgage, a job, you buy food, any goods and services, this country is poorer and life is harder for everyone as a result of that. So stop these daft statements about, oh, now we're going to work hand in glove. I mean, the Bank of England and the government are in completely different places. Let's be frank about this. That's another reason why there's so little confidence in the British economy. Cancel your conference, get back to Parliament, reverse the budget, that would be a start.
So let's be clear what you think the problem was. Do you think it was the level of tax cuts, or do you think it was the way that it was announced and the lack of an OBR report? What exactly do you think the problem was?
You can't separate the two things out, but essentially, I believe that the entire approach from this government to economic policy has absolutely no confidence from the markets, from the people of this country, and that's the cause. So it's the way they do things, it's their belief, it's the way they've doubled down on that, and the individual decisions, look, they all add up to an aggregate position which is unsustainable. But I don't think people looked at individual measures in the budget and said, look, that's tipped us over the edge, but their whole approach to this is at fault. And unless they can accept that and change course, things will not get easy.
But Labour's accepted a number of the things that they announced. They've accepted they're going to go ahead with the 1p cut in the base rate of income tax, for example, that was announced. You have a similar plan on keeping energy bills down as well. So Labour's approach isn't so different.
No, well, we have a completely different approach to an economic policy. We believe you can borrow money in a crisis, that's OK. You can borrow money to invest in assets and de-risk climate change progress and therefore bring more private money into the economy. We don't believe you can borrow money for tax cuts for already wealthy people as a growth policy or as a sustainability policy.
But you're not casting yourself as the party that's fiscally responsible. So where are the details of how you'll pay for the 1p cut in income tax?
Well, look, we would be raising more revenue, first of all, because we would have been raising more from the windfall tax, which is a bigger and longer tax than the one the government have put in place. We've already announced things like abolishing non-dom status, which would bring in additional revenue. So we would be raising more revenue. But, you know, our position always has been taxes are high in this country because the government's poor record on growth. So I know they accept that bit of it. But I'm afraid, and if we had an OBR assessment of the budget, we'd be able to break down some of these individual decisions. I've got to be absolutely clear with you. We reject this entire government's approach to economic policy as unsustainable, dangerous, reckless, and a gamble with people's futures in this country.
Might you feel differently when we get an OBR report? One is scheduled to come out at the end of November. Andrew Griffith told me that it's up to the OBR whether or not they produce a report earlier than that. Would you like to see one earlier?
Well, of course I would like to see one. But unless the government is willing to act, this is not going to get better. It's only got better in a very short, temporary way because the Bank of England stepped in to spend £65 billion over 14 days to try and restore some confidence in the government gilt market, the government borrowing that they issued to the market in order to finance their spending plans. This is an incredibly serious situation. And simply saying, look, we might talk to the independent forecasters and have a bit of robustness, unless they are willing to recognise the loss of confidence within them, I honestly don't think this will get better, and it's real-world consequences for everyone in this country.
So what do you want the government to do?
I want them to recall Parliament. I want them to cancel the budget. I want them to start again with a proper, independent forecast, realistic commitment to sound money, the Bank of England and the government working on the same page rather than being in two different places. But, of course, the fundamental pitch from Liz Truss is that she would do this. She would never have got elected in 2019, by the way. The places that voted Conservative in 2019 would never have voted for this agenda.
Know that, do we?
So it was a completely different pitch that they made. So they've got to do it now. It's their only chance to try and get away with it. But it's already failed on its own terms. We've already had the reaction to it. Look at government borrowing costs. Look at the value of sterling. It has already happened. And unless they recognise that, rather than trying to send ministers out with weak lines...
And yet the markets have stabilised, haven't they?
Well, partly because of the Bank of England's intervention. But nobody can say the situation is a good one. And, of course, political stability does feed into economic stability. And if people don't see the government willing to change course after the absolutely disastrous reaction that last Friday got, well, how are they going to have confidence in future?
Labour will have liked the polls that they looked at this morning. One of them gives Labour a 33-point lead over the Tories. Are you confident you'll win the next election?
Look, I know people get excited about polls, but look, they go up and down. I honestly, this morning, my feeling is not of any kind of happiness at opinion polls. It's of anger, because all of this was completely unnecessary. We've had crises in the past where the government has to react, and it can be difficult. There are trade-offs. You've got to make decisions. This was an unforced error from the government. And to see people, though, they just don't understand the impact of what they have done on people's mortgages, on their well-being, because they just don't care.
Sorry to rush you, but I want to get you back to the poll. Do you not want to show that you're pleased about the poll? Are you worried about looking...
If you have opinion polls, you obviously want to be leading in them. I take a lot of heart from the fact that Labour is the party people look to on the economy now to trust for their growth, their prospects, their wages. Of course, I want to see that. But I see it, to be frank, more as a responsibility that we have on us to give this country the kind of government that it needs and people deserves. And I take that responsibility very seriously.
And of course, the government would say by the next election, people will learn more about Labour policies and they won't like them, and the government will say that they will have produced growth in the economy.
Well, they like what they see so far. They like what they see in Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and myself and the team in terms of what we are putting forward. For us, it's about improving business investment, long-term industrial strategy, reforming things like business rates, making the Brexit deal work better so it's easier for exporters. These are real things that people can look to and say, yes, of course, that would improve our well-being and situation. You can't really look at the government and say tax cuts for the well-off are the way to make the country grow and the economy work better, because they're not.